One of my favorite times all week. Here we are to talk USC football and hear from the expertise of these two. So please gather around for the next 60. Join us here at the Voice of College Football. Leave those comments and questions. We appreciate your contributions as well via the Super Chat. Matt Zemek's here. Tim Prangley's here. Trojan's Wires, where you can find both of them each and every day. I am merely Mark, and we are here at the Voice of College Football, USC. So welcome in. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
Doing great. Not a whole lot of news. I'm sure that's going to start speeding up quickly as we approach, Big Ten Media Days. And real news will start popping out, I'm sure.
Big Ten Media Days here in about 3 weeks, along with all the other conferences. It's my aim and my goal to get you guys out to Big Ten Media Days here, maybe starting next year.
Yeah, we'll see. I was almost for sure wanted to go, but then I said, I talked to Matt as well. I said, I could try to go to Media Days, or I can try to get out to another game this year. And I told I'd rather cover an additional game than go to the aircraft carrier and hear a bunch of canned responses from coaches. So, I mean, you could tell me more about that, Mark. You've been there, but to me, it just seems like you're going to get a lot of the same coach speak at those things.
You will. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And most of that you can pull offline somewhere. You can find it somewhere online because there's a reason these guys are at podiums speaking. So somebody's recording it somewhere, even if it's not the official news conference setting. I thought it was good for us to get out there last year. I will not be attending. However, we do have media credentials in for two of our folks here at the Voice of College Football. So we shall see if they are going to be going. Big Ten Media Days coming up. The Phil Steele edition of his college football preview is also out. If it was worth the time and the money involved, I would mail one of these out to maybe a lucky viewer because I received two. I paid for one. Maybe this is when Phil Steele sent me one for free a couple years in a row. And so maybe this was once I ordered one. That's the reason I got two, I guess. Anyway, I've got two of them. They both read the same, though. So just wanted to run by his position rankings for USC, how they compare to the rest of the Big Ten in the nation. So let's start at quarterback. And this is a quarterback room rating. So, of course, the starter, I got to think he doesn't state it anywhere here that I know of, but it's got to be a 90% starter rating. But he does measure in the entire quarterback room. So just to give you a frame of reference, top 5 in the nation are Texas, Georgia, Oregon, Alabama, and Ole Miss. USC is number 25 at the quarterback position.
Well, I mean, Miller Moss is not going to get the respect that he's due until then. Jada Mayaba came in. He, had 1 year, played well in the Mountain West, but he's going to have to show a little more than that in order to get to national rankings and put those numbers up. So I'm not much to argue with because there's not much to argue. We have one game with Miller Moss, although I think his upside's going to be great. I know that his coach, aka offensive coordinator, is going to put him in a lot of great positions, and they got great receivers, but that's not talking about the quarterback room. So I don't have much to argue with there. Matt, do you?
Not really. I mean, top 25, that seems pretty reasonable for a guy who, was brilliant in the Holiday Bowl, but really that's his college resume essentially. So, nothing really objectionable. And it's up to Miller Moss to prove it, right? And it's up to this offensive line to put Miller Moss in a position where he can prove itself. So really, I have no fundamental complaints. I'd be more interested in where Miller Moss rates compared to, say, Drew Aller. Compared to other quarterbacks at some of the other higher profile programs in the Big Ten, that I think would be the meatier and more revelatory item in terms of position and player rankings.
Penn State at 16, Ohio State at 19.
Okay, now I have a problem with that.
Well, that's room
9 spots above USC. Based on everything we've seen, I think I'm not going to say USC should be above Penn State. I would say they really need to be very, very close. And 9 spots, that's not very, very close. That's kind of sort of close, but not very close. So, yeah, I think you have to put the Penn State and USC quarterback rooms pretty much on equal footing. Both Miller Moss and Drew Aller are unproven quarterbacks. I think everyone in the room should agree on that. They have to step up and show it in 2024. So giving Penn State 9 slots, that seems a little on the generous side there.
But Matt, they arrive at this spot, so I don't disagree with your conclusion. Maybe I slightly disagree with how you arrive at that conclusion, because Miller Moss was outstanding for 1 game. So when given the keys, he rolled. Drew Aller had a full season. So did he prove something? Yeah, he proved that if he's going to be this for the next 2 years, he's going to be an average quarterback. That's what he's proven to date. So he's not proven to be exceptional or good, but he's proven that he can go out and quarterback a top 10 team when he's got all the pieces in place. So Moss, much more impressive with a much slighter resume.
I just gotta... Go ahead, Tim.
No, you go. Sorry, you go ahead, Matt.
Well, okay, so Drew Aller has proved that he's an average quarterback, right, Mark?
Well, to date, he's proven that. I think he's better than that. We shall see. But
okay, well, and so when we this is a thing, right? Much as you do your top 25 rankings that make sense, which I fully subscribe to. Like I am on board with how you do team rankings, and you and I both, we don't really believe in preseason rankings. But if we're going to do preseason rankings, it's not on what we are projecting, it's on what you have done, right? And there's not a lot of meat on the bone with Aller.
And a good point. What's better, to have the one time you played, you shined, or to have had multiple opportunities to shine and look like the dull knife in the drawer?
Yeah, I agree with both of you, but I am anticipating that Aller is going to improve. But you can take the tact that this should be based solely on the performance to date and no speculation, or you can also take the tact, as I have in the past, that I'm also going to make a projection.
Sure. And I want to be clear, for any Penn State fans in the audience, I'm not saying Miller Moss is clearly better than Drew Aller right now. All right. I'm not saying that, not implying that. I'm basically saying they both pretty much deserve to be on the same plane. And I don't think that's a controversial take, because they're both unproven. They both have a lot of work to do this season. So I just basically put them on the same level. I'm not saying USC should be 9 slots above Penn State. I am saying Penn State shouldn't be 9 slots above USC. That's a lot of real estate in a ranking.
For as good as this conference is, and when it's all said and done, it may displace the SEC as the best conference in college football this year. It is not a good quarterback conference. Therefore, Dylan Gabriel is the combination of the best and the most proven, and everything put into one basket, along with having the best weapons, or certainly comparable with Ohio State. But with everything taken into consideration, that's the best quarterback situation in the conference. However, I would not be surprised at the end of this year if Miller Moss was not considered arguably the best quarterback in the conference.
I expect him to get better every game. So let's look at it. You can either take it from the tack that the Holiday Bowl was a one-off. There was something about the Louisville defense that we didn't know about, which we thought was solid. I know that there's going to be some pretty steep competition on the defensive side of the ball in the Big Ten. I'm aware of that as well. But he's going to have to get better. At least you would assume that he's going to get better. And he showed he has a command of this offense. Lincoln Riley has an amazing track record, not only just having good offense, but also developing quarterbacks. And I'm going to keep saying it. I can't wait to get to the receiver room, because I'm sure that no matter where they're put, I'm going to have to go out on a limb and say they're probably underrated. So,
Matt, to your point, we could almost take the same argument and point toward Columbus, Ohio. Will Howard's a good quarterback, but is CJ Stroud showing up this season for Ohio State? No, it's pretty much been proven. He's played for 2.5 years. He's not getting much better. Will he get a little bit better? Will his stats get better because he's playing with those other players? As long as he doesn't make mistakes and he's the same quarterback, those other players are going to take the 3-yard swing passes and turn them into 22-yard gains, et cetera, et cetera. So his numbers, and that's another thing that I do with my rankings that is extremely difficult to do, but I try to do it, and I try to remove the impact of the other positions. So if I'm rating a quarterback, I'm not looking at his weapons or his offensive line. I'm trying to separate the two and just rate the quarterback by themselves and not project their stats based on the complementary pieces around them.
Yep, that's definitely a layer in the larger debate. I think the ultimate thing is just, and I know that like this is part of the industry that we live in, that we work within, off-season content, preseason projections. I mean, fans love this stuff. It's why people read Phil Steele and Lindy's and all these off-season magazines. But gosh, preseason projections, they so often wind up poisoning the well in terms of a college football season, in terms of distorting perceptions of who and what is actually better, in terms of which teams deserve to be in various bowls, championship games, etc. I mean, the classic example, Auburn being 17 in the 2004 preseason. That's why Auburn didn't play USC in the Orange Bowl. I mean, it's not fair, but yet that's how these things often go. But like, this is why preseason predictions, as much as like they are the lifeblood of college football discussion, especially right now, it's after 4th of July. We can smell football right around the corner. But I really like to see teams play games before I get into assessments. Right now, it's all projection, and we need to remember that. And I mean, I have my thoughts about what USC is going to do, but we can all admit and we can all agree that it's going to depend on certain things happening. And until we see these position groups actually in live battle, it's all just speculation.
I have said this for a long, long time and perceived it and proven it and confirmed it that, this is not a baseball season where everybody has statistics that have been compiled for 6 months and 162 games. And okay, at the end of the year, okay, this guy that we didn't know anything about at the beginning, he had 314 with 35 home runs. Okay, we're going to give him his due. That a lot of these All-America and all-conference teams, especially that, there's a lot of reputation baked into that. And as long as the player didn't do anything egregious, to change that narrative about his playing ability coming in, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt at the end if he was a preseason All-America or all-conference player. You guys ready for running back?
Sure.
Top 5 in the nation, according to Phil Steele. Ohio State, number 1. Penn State, 2. Oklahoma State, Liberty. Liberty is the 4th best running back room in the nation. I'm going to have to do a deep dive on that one. North Carolina at 5. USC at, guess. Take a guess where he is. USC's running back room.
No clue.
Okay, 49.
Yeah, and I don't know how. Well, I'd love to hear why. I mean, that's the problem.
If you have USC's quarterback room at 25 and the running back room at 49, yeah, I'm wondering how you get there.
We move on to wide receivers. Top 5 in the nation. Oregon 1, Mizzou 2, Ohio State 3, Ole Miss 4, USC 5.
Okay, yeah, top 5 receiver room in the nation. No argument there.
Surprisingly, higher than I thought.
Should be good.
Not higher, not higher than I would put them, but higher than I thought we would get from a national magazine. But I'm going back to the running back room. I think maybe it's just because of lack of production. I mean, because that's what you see. You look at Woody Marks. I mean, especially in this offense, and what I'm sure he's going to be used at, as far as catching the ball out of the backfield, wheel routes, just anything. They're going to get him the ball in space. He is the all-time receiving leader in Mississippi State history. Now, he played with some of that with Mike Leach, so there's that. But he is all-time leader, and he's like, I think, fifth, Matt, in the SEC all-time. So that's somebody who's maybe not going to be running the ball. But then you look through Peterson, right? Amarian Peterson. I mean, I've been talking about Quentin Joyner forever. And then you add the thumper, the freshman, Brian Jackson. These guys are all four-star running backs from Texas. So that seems really low just for the roster. Yes, none of them have proven to be breakout players in college football, but a veteran like Marks, along with those three young guys with a hell of a lot of talent, outside of San Diego, USC running backs that come from Texas do very well. So I'm just kind of curious why it's so low.
Yeah,
I would assume that Phil and other evaluators when making these preseason rankings, I assume they are operating under the thought process of returning production, tangible stats, and this group doesn't have a lot of that. But
correct.
we do think they're going to be good. Like Tim and I are definitely on board and are in agreement. These guys are really good. It would be interesting, Mark, if we got the offensive line ranking, because if the offensive line ranking isn't very high, then you could kind of say, all right, maybe these running backs aren't quite good enough to transcend the limitations of the offensive line. But if Phil Steele gives this offensive line a decent ranking, then that would make the running back ranking even more of a puzzler.
That's what I was saying about that. That might be an indictment on what they think of how we're going to be able to run the ball, meaning, what's been going on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Unless, again, he's taking the approach that I attempt to take, where you could have, in my opinion, the best running back room in the country and the worst offensive line room in the country. And you wouldn't say, well, I'm going to back off the best running back room to like number 30 because the offensive line's horrible. And I'm going to move the offensive line group up a little bit better because they're going to look better because these running backs are going to break tackles and make them look better. No, I would rank the offensive line the worst and the running back room the best. Okay, let's get to the offensive line. So the offensive line with Georgia 1, Texas 2, Oregon 3, Oklahoma State 4, and Florida State 5. That's your national top 5. USC at 32.
So quarterback 25, offensive line 32, running backs 49. To me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It's way too low.
How you arrive at that compilation of rankings for those three position groups.
A lot, yeah. So he's a true freshman, but Elijah Page, right, comes in and everyone watched the bowl game, played amazing. He's a high rated 4-star out of Arizona when he came into the program. I'm really not sure as far as Jonah Monheim was considered, if he'd returned by a lot of PFF and everyone else, that if he stayed at left tackle would have been one of the better left tackles in the country, but he's moving inside to center. And I don't know. It was a young offensive line last year. Prangley was a young guy. Alani Noah, young guy. There's a lot of talent, a lot of size on this offensive line. Outside the top 10, 15, maybe 20, but 30. Again, all those seem very conservatively low. And I'm with Matt in saying that the only way I can justify and think about these rankings would be the fact they're going off of how the production last year. And if that is the case, then yeah, last year that these would reflect poorly on these current players. Because one, most of them are young, and they don't have a lot of returning experience and reps. So
I'll put it this way.
Go ahead.
I was just going to state, if you put all those rankings together, This sounds like about the 35th best offense in the country. I don't know that I would be able to find 15 offenses better than USC. I certainly wouldn't take 15 offenses in the country above USC.
Yeah, so the point that I'd like to insert in here is that, one of the big continuous talking points on these shows at the Voice of College Football, is certainly a big talking point for the folks who follow us regularly in the chat on both this show and our Friday Conquest call-in show. One of the big talking points is consistently throughout the year, if we could just have a top 40 defense, right? Just have a top 40 defense married with Lincoln Riley's offense. That's a winning formula. We're going to have a really good, successful season. The point I'd like to make is, if we have, as Phil Steele is, almost projecting, if we have a top 30 offensive line in the country, like, to me, if the performance is consistent with a top 30 offensive line, then that means Miller Moss is getting good protection. It means he has time to find his receivers. It means that the running backs have decent running lanes, maybe not a dominant running game, but decent. To me, if we have a top 30 offensive line, like, that certainly would seem to set USC up to succeed. So we've been talking a lot about, if we can just have a top 40 defense, if we can just have a top 30 offensive line, if Phil Steele is fundamentally accurate, I think I'll take that. I mean, especially as a Josh Henson skeptic, like, if we can deliver that, I think USC is probably going to be good. I think Tim is a little more optimistic about Henson. He might expect that USC has a top 20 offensive line. But I would take top 30 at this point. I would take top 30 because I think that would tell me that Miller Moss is generally getting the protection he needs, and that the offense generally has the space to create the timing and to create the continuity that Lincoln Riley is looking for in this offense. So I think at this point, yeah, I'll take a top 30 offensive line.
Like to remind the folks of a few things here at the Voice of College Football on our USC show on Monday nights. Number one, we started an opponents series, and we have gotten to 3 of the biggies. Check out those shows if you missed them: LSU, Michigan, and Penn State previews. So again, we'll preview those games, of course, as they come during the season, but we did and started an opponents preview. I was attempting to get somebody on for this week, but we will continue that series hopefully next week. And then also, Matt and I got together for 3 bonus segments. Those will be posted soon. So we've got 3 extremely good choice cuts coming your way. So please get your USC channel membership.
And listen, we have about 150 you guys out there right now. We appreciate all of you supporting us. There are many people I recognize in the chat. You guys are always here, whether you're a Trojan fan or not. You're all greatly appreciated. But if you guys could do us a favor, make sure you're hitting that like button, because it'll get more people to see this show, and we can get a little bit bigger. That's your best way to thank you. If you appreciate us, give us a like. And if you're not already subscribed, there's that little magic arrow. It's right there for you. Couldn't make it easier. Click that subscribe button and join the channel. And while we're at it, thank you to all the members listed on the bottom here. You might as well add on a month. I think that's a month behind, but really appreciate the support we've had since the very beginning. We began memberships on this channel. A number of you guys have been longtime channel members. We're trying to expand. We're going to do, Mark, I think you did a poll on what watch party you want. We're gonna rewatch a game. It looks like it's gonna be the Bush Push game. So if you guys want to watch some football with us and talk about it, the only way you can do that is if you're a member of the channel. It's one of the perks we're trying to get out to you. We want to show some appreciation back. We love all you guys and appreciate you all being here, but we gotta somehow reward these guys that have been financially supporting the channel and the show for about a year now. So thank you to everybody here, but thank you especially to our members. It's really greatly appreciated.
Well said, and thank you, everyone. Absolutely. All right, we move to the defensive line. Tim's pride and joy right here. Here we go. Ohio State number 1, Penn State 2, Utah 3, Michigan 4, and Nebraska 5. USC 46.
So now we're talking maybe depth, because I'm gonna take I'll run with our defensive line. We don't have a lot of depth, but we have a lot of depth at defensive end, and we have a lot of guys that are versatile. I think this is just a prove it year, Mark. I'm seeing a lot of numbers here where I think there's a lot of skepticism about the program. I think this is just really a show us something, because maybe we've had you ranked in the top 20 for the past 3 years, and you've laid an egg every single season. I know that Phil Steele's big on analytics and your past record and how you've performed in the past, but I don't see how you run. I'm scratching my head trying to think where you're going to find 48. Did you say 49? Is that what you said?
46.
Okay, so 45 other defensive lines. That's thinking pretty low on the Power 5 where they think the defensive line would fall. And I'm going to remind everybody that we do have Bear Alexander. Just FYI, if anyone forgot, which I think he's going to have another improved year. This is a year with where he's got to have Coach Henderson, Coach Henney, coaching him up, seeing he bring that dog out in him. And if he does, Bear has all the physical tools in the world. If he can connect with Bear on that level to get him to buy in and to improve his game, Henderson's really big on technique, really big on the playbook, really on the details and developing kids. And Bear has all of the physical tools. What's he gonna do once he actually gets, working on his hand placement, working on his get off? I really am excited to see him and a number of players. So who are those guys going to be? With the list of guys they have, the young guys on defensive line, there's going to be guys. And, Jamil Muhammad, again, a vastly underrated guy. Started out very strong last year. I have nothing to bank this on, but I'm wondering if he was dinged up towards the end of the year, because he came out like gangbusters, with tackles for loss, and then he kind of petered off towards the end of the season. I'm wondering, again, another guy that I expect really big things from. So I don't know, between Muhammad on the outside and you have Bear on the inside, there is that question at nose tackle. How long, how well will we be able to hold up? What will our depth be at that tackle position? But I think they are going to rotate guys. I think there's young guys that are going to step up. Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but that just seems woefully low. 46 is, again, it's got to be indictment on the past. What have you done for us lately?
Okay, Tim, I'm surprised that you think that's woefully low, because defensive line is the most question mark filled unit on this roster, right?
Depth at nose tackle, possibly. That's but see, that's just a question mark. I wonder why these coaches didn't go harder after. So fine, let's say they lost out on some of these high price tag, nose tackles. They didn't go hard off as second tier guys. And I wonder if they said, okay, well, you know what? We'll go for these top tier dudes. We didn't land them. We like the pieces we have. We're going to allocate the assets somewhere else instead. No, I'm not ready to sell. I don't think this is the 46th best defensive line in the country. Obviously, we're going to find out really soon. But I mean, I like the young guys like Abasiri, Matt, that we haven't even seen yet. I'm a bit surprised at it being that low. I do think that's low.
Okay. Well, I would just say for you, Tim, but also for everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football, if you accept the claim, as I do, that defensive line is the most question mark filled position group on the entire roster, like it's the number one concern, and I would put offensive line second, but I would say defensive line is first. If the weakest link is 46, and you think that as I do, I think the secondary is going to be great, and I think the linebackers are going to be good. If the weakest link on the defense is 46, then that point I referenced earlier, having a top 40 defense, we're going to have a top 40 defense if this is the number 46, or more generally, if this is a top 50 defensive line. So I'm not upset at that. Like if it was 65, 70, okay, different conversation. But if the weakest link on this defense is a top 50 unit, and the other units at the middle and then in the back are much higher, much better, USC is probably going to have like a top 35, maybe even top 30 defense. And that's going to get the Trojans where we all hope they go. So I'm pleasantly surprised. I was thinking 65, 70, 75. So I will take this because I'm assuming that the linebacker and especially the secondary ratings have to be a lot higher than 46.
Well, outside of wide receiver, a lot of the numbers I've heard tonight so far have been very conservatively, like really low. And again, I'm going to base it on the fact that they're saying, what have you done? What have you proven? Not what we project you to be, not what can be developed under Coach Henson. You know, who knows what Anthony Lucas is going to look like after spending the offseason. You know, that's another guy that, Sean Nua was asked, because they've been talking about how they like versatile guys on the line. They're not switching out lines. They want them to be able to move out in between positions, move from the end to a tackle, etc., to be disruptive, to hide their fronts and things. And Anthony Lucas' name popped up, almost immediately. Cam Fountain's a young guy. And if you watched him, remember we were talking last week about all-star games and practices and whatever, and going to camps. This guy was eating up 5-star offensive linemen like for lunch, taking their lunch and stuffing them in lockers. I mean, really a young man who's built not like an incoming freshman. And seeing those numbers the way they line up, to me, I don't think they're really giving USC credit for talking to our huge kid, young guy, Braylon Shelby. Watch from you Trojan fans. Get excited for him. Massive young defensive end that's going to be. I know you're saying, hey, Tim, it could be worse, could be in the 60s. But I don't think there's 45 other defensive lines that are better than USC has going into the season.
Hope you're right.
This ranking may give some perspective to where Phil Steele's coming from and may temper some criticism a little bit here, Tim. So Michigan has produced and fielded a top 3 to 4 offensive line for 3 consecutive years. One of those seasons, if not 2, they won the Joe Moore Award. They probably should have won it last year, but they didn't. Anyway, they've had a top 3 or 4 offensive line in the country for 3 consecutive years, but they lost a few key pieces to the NFL. But you would think that they would be able to retool, their new head coach as an offensive line guy that crafted those lines. They are 36th at the offensive line position, according to Phil Steele. Michigan's 36th best offensive line in the country.
Yeah, so it might have to do with, again, returning production, because they lost a lot off that line, didn't they?
Yes. Linebacker. Iowa's number 1, Oklahoma 2, Georgia 3, Texas 4, Oklahoma State 5, USC 32.
I mean, of all the positions, linebacker, I can see question marks, because
36.
the question marks along the linebacking room start with staying healthy. Can we see Cobb become the guy he was when he was at Oklahoma State? And not what was going on with that Grinch situation? I mean, does that change out? Does Mascarenas Arnold come down and play as an all-conference player like he did up at Oregon State? Is Gentry finally in this Lynn? I mean, I can't wait to see how Lynn uses him. I mean, there's not a more unique linebacker than what he can do out there than Eric. We've seen him be disruptive in the passing game, and we've seen him get into the backfield, especially as a freshman. He was an all-conference, all-freshman player, right? Or was he maybe a freshman All-American at Arizona State? So wild cards, nothing proven, haven't been able to stay healthy, kind of thrown together. But again, if things break right, and Matt Entz can get these guys up and tackling like they forgot to do last year, I can't bitch too much about that one, because the linebacking play at USC has been below where it should be for quite some time now.
All right, so defensive line is 46, linebackers are 32. I'm betting that the secondary checks in, give or take 2 or 3 spots, around 20. And if that's the case, that, you average those 3 numbers, that's basically a top 30 defense for USC. And I'm not sure how much Phil Steele is baking D'Anton Lynn, Coach Henney, woof woof, Matt Entz, Doug Belk, all these great coaches into the equation. Maybe USC can rise 5 or 6 spots above what just the raw numerical averages and ratings suggest. So I'm thinking with these ratings, if these ratings are fundamentally accurate, more or less, if Phil basically is in the ballpark in all of these ratings, that means USC is going to have a top 25, top 30 defense, which, sign me up.
Yeah. It's a good point, Matt.
So after we finish the 2 positions, we will take these rankings against the rest of the Big Ten, because he consolidates this against the Big Ten to see where USC should theoretically finish in the conference. All right. Defensive back. Ohio State's number 1, Oklahoma 2, Georgia 3, Clemson 4, Iowa 5, USC 55.
Wow. Okay. So here's the thing. If we had guys on USC secondary that didn't play lights out last year, right? That didn't come from one of the best defenses in the country at UCLA, for instance, then I'm with it. So there goes out the window the idea that, well, it's returning production. Is it returning production at your school? I mean, I don't really know. I go ahead, Matt, because I don't know what to say. That to me is woefully underrated.
I'm stumped. I mean, what D'Anton Lynn has brought over from UCLA, with Humphrey and Ramsey, those are good players. We saw them play well last year, including against USC. Doug Belk, by all appearances, seems like a lights-out secondary coach. And, of course, you don't have Dante Williams. So, just not having Dante Williams is itself a big plus. And you have Taylor Mays, who can coach on the field in the stadium, because there are now no limits on coaches being able to deliver hands-on coaching at practices and games. So, I'm sold on this secondary. I am stunned. Wait, someone thinks that the secondary is a worse and more question mark filled USC position group than the defensive line? I don't know how you get there with that. So wow, that is the shocker, clearly, because having Doug Belk and Taylor Mays, a fully empowered Taylor Mays, coaching the secondary, I think these guys are going to do great. That is the defensive position group I have the fewest worries about. So Phil obviously has his reasons, but I am shocked by that number.
So on the surface, it seems a bit contradictory to where it reads here in the USC the preview here, going to defensive backs for this season. USC adds in 2 UCLA starters, an Oregon State and Mississippi State starter, and can only move up the past defensive rankings with plenty of experience.
Okay, so that kind of maybe offers the clue that it was just so absolutely awful that he's saying USC is going to be better, but really not that much better. Okay, all right. So someone has been so traumatized by Dante Williams and Alex Grinch that he's not willing to move USC 20, 30 more spots up the board. Okay, I can get that. I'm going to disagree with that, but I can get that. I can understand that.
And one of the pieces returning from last year's USC secondary, Jacoby Covington, when he was healthy, when he was playing, was one of the bright spots of that defense. So, yeah, and what we saw, they said Mississippi State star, DeCarlos Nicholson, he looked great in the spring game. Every size of that. These corners, I haven't seen big, fast corners that are turning around for the ball, playing good defense, up physical, hit you in the mouth corners, 6'2", 6'3" corners in a while. I don't know. The only thing I can assume is that they're looking at last year's defense and saying, well, you were like in the hundreds, so we'll move you up 50 spots. We can't move you up 80 spots. But I mean, I know Phil Steele doesn't work that way. I know Phil Steele is a lot more detailed and meticulous than that. I know his rankings are very, very accurate. I'm just wondering if does he have enough data points with these defensive positions, with these rooms, to actually make an accurate prediction using his own standards, because it's maybe cobbled together so much he doesn't know what how Lynn's scheme is going to work. All new coaches, maybe all this is added in. I've got no idea how these are scored so low. Every one of the rooms I would have at least 10 to 15 spots higher. So I'm trying to figure out where these scores are coming from.
Yeah, in terms of my, am I optimistic about USC this season? Well, optimistic that they'll make a push for the playoff. I don't think they'll actually get there. Like, I don't think they have enough defensive line depth to get to 10-2, which would be good enough to make the playoff. Right now I'm at 9-3. That's where I am. So, does that make me an optimist? I don't know, but not a full optimist, certainly, but like, I'm not a full-on pessimist as well. And I think to the extent that I do have optimism about this 2024 season, it's what you were just talking about, Tim, that there's just the past 2 years watching USC play defense, or watching USC attempt to play defense, it's just been such a rock bottom experience. And the narrative is so deeply baked in. Lincoln Riley doesn't take defense seriously. When have you ever seen a Lincoln Riley team play good defense? And actually, to answer that question straightforwardly for a bit, the 2020 season at Oklahoma was the one year when Lincoln Riley had a reasonably good defense. But that was the pandemic year. And we know how much that year skewed all sorts of evaluations, player comparisons, team patterns. Like, that was a year when Indiana nearly made a New Year's Six bowl. It was a year when Michigan was absolutely atrocious. Lots of weird stuff happened during the pandemic year. And that's the only year in which a Lincoln Riley head coached defense was good. So, okay, I understand the skepticism about Lincoln Riley having a good defense, but like, you can't just ignore how bad last year's coaches were and how good these coaches really do seem to be. Maybe a factor in all of this is that, they think that D'Anton Lynn whipping UCLA's defense into shape in one season, maybe that's just not enough for a lot of these guys. Maybe if he had 3 years on his college resume, that would seem to be more of a reason to elevate USC, to kind of give the Trojans that reputation-based boost, and just 1 year at UCLA isn't doing it for a lot of these analysts. But I do think, and again, my cause for optimism is I'm a D'Anton Lynn believer, and also the Coach Henne, Entz, Belk, Taylor Mays, and I think Taylor Mays being able to coach this secondary fully because of the removal of the coaching staff limitations. Like, those are some really key factors in why I think this defense is primed to surprise a lot of people and blow apart that baked in narrative about Lincoln Riley teams not taking defense seriously. I think USC really could overshoot the mark in terms of expectations, just because so many national pundits are they're fatigued, I think. Like, there's just, they can't think another way. They can't think any differently. They're set on Lincoln Riley doesn't take defense seriously, but hey, I think this coaching staff is ready to achieve significantly.
And I do everything you say, Matt. I completely agree with. I mean, it's whether the narrative is accurate about Riley's defense. I've gone on record saying, again, I don't know any coaches that aren't all about their defense, how detailed it is, etc. I'm not going to go into that part of it. But I do believe that you can't go. This is the residue you're going to get, and you've written on this. You've spoken to it many times. When you retain Alex Grinch an extra year, when you let Helton run a very proud USC defense into the ground like he did during his tenure as well. You got to remember, we came off that season where Helton was fired and we were getting blown out the Coliseum by a good Oregon State running attack, but we made it look like, that they had Gale Sayers, Barry Sanders, and Sweetness wrapped all into one, with the 1979 USC offensive line blocking for them. That's what I mean. To turn it around all in one season might be much for any human being's mind to wrap around, except for your boy here, who's very optimistic about this team. So yes, I mean, I get it all. And I've been a big fan of Phil Steele forever. He's not wrong very often, which is scaring the shit out of me a little bit. I ain't gonna lie, but I do think that he's very data driven. And when you put the data together and what USC's done on the field for the past 7 years on defense, it's kind of hard to say, what do you mean we're not top 25 in linebacker, defensive line, and secondary? I think like Barry says here, you know what? Just prove it on the field. It's fun to get bragging rights in the preseason, but if you come out and handle business in Vegas, win or lose, show that you got your shit together and that you have a defense that's going to hit people in the mouth. And if you want to play USC, sure, you may win, but man, are you guys going to be limping into Sunday morning? Then I think that will be mission accomplished. And to sit here and complain about a number of preseason ranking when all we have to go on is I just think, one, what Lynn did is kind of hard to not do that. Two, the defensive staff that Riley put together, including Coach Henney, and three, the pieces USC has physically. I mean, there are some physical freaks on this defense. If that comes together how I think it's going to come together, USC should be able to prove it. And at the end of the day, that all this is moot.
Yeah, and just the one point to add, the national narrative about USC defense, obviously it's mainly because of Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch, but also there was Todd Orlando. There was Clancy Pendergast. Like, it has been a long time since USC had a really, really good defensive coordinator, so it's not just that the last 2 years were atrocious, but yeah, like, you have to rack your brain and you have to go through your mental Rolodex. Like, has USC had a really good defensive coordinator since the end of the Pete Carroll era? It's a struggle. And so for national commentators to think USC is not going to be all that and a bag of chips on defense, it's understandable. But I think that this defense is going to actually rise up.
And when you look at the defensive play, that's a good point about the previous defensive coordinators you listed. I mean, you look at the who's who of the USC defensive players over the past decade with your Leonard Big Cat Williams or Asua Cravens, go to Adoree Jackson, the true star talent that been wasted at USC over the past decade or more, a little over more. It is a head scratcher, and USC is going to get that talent again. And it appears it's not going to be wasted on this defensive staff. So again, look forward to it. Be excited, Trojans, because I hope this should be really good. This should be really good bulletin board material for the. If there were any questions about that dog work that's going to happen in August, this bulletin board material should be enough to motivate. I don't think these kids will need it, but it sure as heck will be enough to give them a little extra motivation.
And my favorite USC defensive player during the Clay Helton era, I can never recall how to pronounce his first name, but the safety, Tuafunga.
Talanoa Hufanga.
Talanoa Hufanga. Love that guy. Guy seemed to be in the right place at the right time all the time with the game on the line.
Exactly. And he could be that extra piece the 49ers need in the back line of their defense to finally win the Super Bowl. Because the opposing teams were hunting matchups in the playoffs, and so Hufanga could be that extra piece.
Let's not forget about special teams. Now, I would think that this would be the most difficult, in one sense, to evaluate because the guys that are going to be doing the kickoff return, the punt coverage, all of that, they're going to be completely changed out from the previous. Those guys, usually you don't have a guy that's playing kickoff coverage every year of his career. That's a revolving door. However, you look at punter and kicker, obviously they're the most important guys on those units. And then I would think you would look at, if there is a special teams coach, what is that guy's reputation? Does this program tie up the loose ends when it comes to special teams? Are they buttoned up every year, or are they one of those programs where not so much? All right. Our top 5 in the nation in special teams: Bama 1, Texas 2, Georgia 3, Auburn 4, Michigan 5, USC's at 8.
Well, a big part of that.
I will take that. I mean, most of that has to do with Zachariah Branch for sure. But the main thing for USC special teams, other than Zachariah Branch, providing some timely kick returns to increase the margin for error for Miller Moss in the offense, to kind of relieve Miller Moss in the offense of the burden of having to score all the time. The main thing is make those gosh darn 38-yard field goals, like Dennis Lynch shanking a 38, 34, 35-yard kick, that could give us a 2-possession lead. Oh, I'm just so over that. Oh, please. So just make the field goals you're supposed to make. Would it be great if we have a kicker who can just, ram them in from 48, 49, 50? Sure, but make 34 to 39, please. Just way too many misses from medium, almost chip shot range from Dennis Lynch. That's what needs to be weeded out this year.
Well, and then you bring in Eddie Zapliki, right? Who he came over last year, had a bit of a, not as good a year as he had over at Arizona State, but it's still a solid punter. Now that we're gonna have, we kind of talked about this earlier. Now that you've removed the ability of coaches to, your analysts to coach on the field, and you're going to have your de facto, like Matt has wanted forever. You're going to have a special teams coordinator. Not that they didn't have one before. I mean, again, all these coaches, we went over this a million times, have a special teams experience in their resumes. But that part's going to be there. You have the kicker. You have Robles coming in as a kicker. There's a lot. They did upgrade a lot on special teams going from last year to this year. That's high, but like Matt said, the vast majority of that's going to fall right in the back of Zachariah Branch.
So when you put it all together against, go ahead, man.
I would just say, hey, Phil, if you're watching this show here at the Voice of College Football, if I will take a number 25 secondary and number 25 special teams instead of a number 55 secondary and number 8 special teams. Maybe we can kind of meet in the middle there.
Maybe Phil is watching. He likes us here at the Voice of College Football, and we hope to have him on, as we typically do each and every off season. We'll have to work on that as soon as I get off here to make sure that we're still in contact here. So against the rest of the Big Ten, and keep in mind, everyone, sometimes these rankings sound low. The conference is now at 18 teams, so let's also keep that in mind. At quarterback, USC 3, running back 9, receiver 3, offensive line 4, defensive line 10, linebacker 11, defensive back 12, special teams 2, coaching 4.
Wow.
So double digits in all 3 defensive position groups.
Yes.
Yeah, like you can pretty clearly see that just, the expectation for USC's defense is not all that high on a national level. And some people might get upset, but again, I think this defense is going to greatly exceed the national narrative and the national expectations. And you know what? If there are USC defensive players watching this show, well, here you go. You are viewed as a lower half, the lower 9 in the 18-team Big Ten. Phil still thinks you're a lower half group, defensive line, linebackers, secondary in the Big Ten. If that's not motivation, I don't know what is. So, You have
And
some bulletin board material there.
And I'm just going to go back again, and you know this, Mark, and I got a little bit of this when you set up that interview for our channel. If you guys want to look at it, last year, we went over USC with Phil Steele right here on the USC Voice of College Football. He's really into the models that he builds. Also have to do with I just lost it. There's a pattern, but that's the wrong word I'm trying to think of. But basically, the model he uses. There's a lot of year over year stuff as well. And I'm wondering if that model just gets gummed up with all the pieces that you're trying to fit. Because let's face it, this year is not going to be your typical year to year change count the number of starters from last year's defense. You got like a couple, you probably have a couple of guys. We have an entirely new starting defense, and you have an entirely new defensive coaching staff. The pieces we brought together, to all of us, to anybody who follows football, knows that you bring starters from schools around, not just stars, but guys who were conference players in their conferences. You're going to have a solid thing. I think we're looking at the shell shock of multiple years of poor play, and I think that does affect whatever these rankings are, because I don't think it reflects the one that hit me was fourth best coaching staff in the Big Ten, which was kind of interesting for me. Who are the top three? Well, I mean, you know they are. This could be Ohio State, 1. Do they?
Let me grab it. It is Iowa 1. Ohio State 2, Penn State 3.
So we're ahead of Michigan. That's really interesting.
Well, a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of turnover at
Iowa 1.
Right?
I mean, Iowa, being number 1 on defense and special teams, sure, but there's this thing called offense.
And they've got a new offensive coordinator who was pretty successful at Western Michigan.
Well,
we have offensive coordinators
a lot of stock
everywhere. So
a lot of stock in one guy. And to be more specific, putting a lot of stock in one guy who's not a confirmed rock star in the profession. Let me put it that way.
Sure.
Maybe he will become a rock star, but we haven't seen it yet.
He is UCLA last in coaching. 18.
Well, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
With Eric Bieniemy, that is surprising. Like
But that's just one coordinator. Matt, one coordinator does not make a coaching staff.
Okay, not talking about making a coaching staff. I'm just saying not being 18 in an 18-team conference. Like I would say Purdue. Who's on Purdue? And I mean, no offense to Ryan Walters, but like he's just, he just hasn't had time to prove himself. But Eric Bieniemy, like, he's proved himself more than anyone on Purdue's staff, right? So
my thinking is once you get to 15, really at that point, you're just, you're really, as the margins probably get pretty thin, right? Once you get to about the 15th best coaching staff in an 18-team conference.
And I got to say that the more I look at LSU, and we had a discussion today on LSU. You can check out, folks, those conversations, those videos over on the LSU channel. So I took another look at LSU today. Carter, our guy with Power Hour LSU, breaking down the Tigers. The more I think that they're susceptible, the more I think they can be taken in this game, the more I'm leaning USC. He believes that it's the worst LSU defensive line in decades.
And hey, I've talked to Carter Bryant. I love Carter Bryant. So, hey, Carter, I know that you want LSU to be good, but I hope you're right.
John appears to disagree with all of you guys. I'm just kidding. I'll not give that more air than it needs to have. Sorry.
I know that they did something with one of the best defensive players in the country, Harold Perkins, last year that I completely disagreed with, and they're going to do the same thing with him this year. 2 years ago, he wreaked havoc all over the place and probably was the reason why LSU advanced to the SEC championship game. Then last year, they boxed him in. They didn't let him roam and be the freak athlete that he is, disrupting plays. They boxed him in as an inside linebacker. They're going to do the same thing this year. Not the way to go.
Well, if LSU wants to coach poorly, that is just fine by me.
We're good with that. Yeah.
And let's just while we're talking about LSU, let's just underscore the point. If USC can win that LSU game, I think that's the most important game of the season, and not that Notre Dame and UCLA and Michigan and Wisconsin and Penn State aren't hugely important. Of course they are. But I think LSU is not just the tone setter, but it's also the table setter, because if you get past that game, that means that if you lose at Michigan, you still have one other game on the schedule that you can lose, and you can still get to 10-2. But if you lose to LSU, you have to go 11, you have to go 10-1 the rest of the way, and that's a very heavy lift. But if you get past LSU, then you can go 9-2 in your remaining 11 and get to the playoffs. So that LSU game is just so massive. And John Toops, he's obviously geeked up for that game, but it's certainly an important one.
Here's my concern. I'm looking at the schedule here, and this is after the Michigan game. Look at that run of teams. Okay, nobody is going to be wowed by that run of teams. Nobody that I just stated that is going to be like, oh, let's look, Mark. No. Who? Okay, Penn State and USC, that is a basic coin flip. I think Penn State's slightly better at this point. I may think differently the week of the game. Things could change. But they're obviously the games being played at the Coliseum. But that is a difficult, there are no let-ups in that. It's every week somebody's capable. Wisconsin's capable. Minnesota's, they're the least of it. Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Washington, Nebraska. There's a lot of potential pitfalls there. Like, they're going to have to bring it every week. They can't lay down for any of those games.
They can't. And of course, there's real sandwich game potential in those games at Minnesota and Maryland. I would say, though, that first off, the Wisconsin game, I'm confident that USC is going to win, because there's this coach on Wisconsin. I don't know. You might have heard of him from time to time. His name is Alex Grinch. Yes. So I'm confident about the Wisconsin game. And then you get past that. You get past Minnesota. So, really, Penn State and Washington, like in the 6 games after Michigan and before the off week on November 9, I think Penn State and Washington are the 2 especially tough games. But Washington has all those roster losses from last season under a new head coach. So I think there's a pretty decent chance that USC can go 5-1. In that 6-game bundle. You then come home to handle Nebraska. You deal with UCLA. And then, hey, if USC is 9-2 going into the Notre Dame game, that might be a playoff game, play-in game for both sides. And if you were to tell every USC fan, everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football, every USC fan alive on this planet, if you said, hey, that Notre Dame game is a playoff play-in, every USC fan, I would think, would say, sign me up. I will take that deal. Let it ride. Let's go to the poker table in Vegas. So, but it all depends on the LSU win. If you bank that win, then you can lose twice the rest of the season. So you could lose at Michigan. You could even lose to Penn State, but if you could handle those other games and then beat Notre Dame at the end, you get to 10-2, you get to the playoff, and that is a transformative year for USC football.
I just want to be clear. I'm not selling this as a gauntlet. I'm just saying this is a sneaky, difficult stretch where everybody is competent.
Absolutely. And I would just add that, I hope that the Minnesota and Maryland games are not nooners. I would like them to be 3:30s, the way the Michigan game is, because there could be a body clock ambush scenario. But you know what? Like, it's life in the Big Ten. I imagine that one of those two will be a nooner. And so, the Trojans need to saddle up, toughen up, and get her done.
Well, Matt and Mark, I'll defer to you guys in this one. What is the more prestigious time slot, the 12 or the 3? That I guess would be a 3:30 time slot. Which one is going to be more? Because those two games don't seem like they're going to be marquee matchups. I'm sure there will be bigger games during those weeks.
So 12.
Yeah, the prestige of the time slot is attached to the prestige of the game. So Mark knows this, that under the original Big Ten schedule, they had to do a redo because of Oregon and Washington entering the conference. But the original 2024 Big Ten schedule had USC going to Happy Valley to play Penn State, and that seemed like a lock for Fox Big Noon. So really, the time slot and the quality of game, the prestige of the two are linked together.
What I think Tim's hitting on is that if you don't garnish that top spot for the Fox noon game, then all the other spots fill up at 3:30 and prime time, and then there's a big drop off. If you're going to go to the noon game, then it's probably Minnesota, and that's a Big Ten Network game, something like that. If it drops that far, it's not like the best games at noon and the second best games at noon. No, the rest of them fall to the other time slots. And then if you're playing at noon and you're not the Fox game, then and USC is not going to find themselves in this position very often at all. These are the Rutgers, Indiana games. This is Minnesota, Purdue playing at noon on the Big Ten Network.
You know what? And just looking at the schedule and looking at the details, I think if there's a non-prestige game that's going to be precisely in that noon slot on BTN, not Fox, as Mark was mentioning, the likely candidate is the Maryland game. Why? Because you have the Friday game the next week. So it would make sense logistically that USC plays the early game Saturday to, increase the time between the Maryland and Rutgers games. Like, I certainly hope that the Maryland game is not a night game in College Park. That would not be right.
I don't think the networks care about USC getting rested up on the plane and getting back to California in time for that Friday game. But I do like the thought on it. That would be advantageous for USC. We had somebody in the chat talking about, yeah. But we had someone in the chat.
The networks, are giving USC this TV money, but you'd certainly like to think that Jen Cohen has said, "Hey, nudge, nudge. We have a Friday game. Hey, can we be in an early game?" You'd like to think those conversations are taking place. Whether the networks give a flying fire truck, that's a separate matter. But you would at least hope that the AD is talking to TV and making sure that USC's best interests are being represented. Maybe not ultimately honored, but at least are being considered in the room.
Somebody in the chat was talking about USC's lukewarm fans and filling up the Coliseum. And I will tell you, if you give Trojan fans a reason to go to the Coliseum, they will pack it. And one more thing when I called into Mark's show this week, Mark, or last week, I don't remember. But Los Angeles isn't filled with USC and UCLA fans, guys. This is a city, one of the major cities in the world, with millions of alumni, millions of people living here, with tens of thousands of fans from all over, and a lot of Big Ten schools. There's a lot of people out here from Ohio State that I've run into all the time in my previous life when I worked in a different field. And so you better believe Wisconsin travels as well as anyone anyway. But I mean, there's a lot of Wisconsin transplants in Southern California that even aren't alumni. They're just from Wisconsin that live in the Southern California basin. You don't think they're coming out to the Coliseum to watch that game? And I will tell you that, yeah, it's hard. I agree. When you have a game on a Friday night at 8:00 against not a marquee team, yeah, that game's not going to sell out. But Saturday games against Penn State, Saturday games against Wisconsin, you don't think that these games are going to be at capacity for those games? Those things are going to be absolute madhouses. And I'm hoping, and I really am hoping, that fans from Wisconsin show some of the champagne, and Chardonnay and cheese SC fans how to cheer for your team. Because if we aren't doing it, they're going to be doing it and embarrassing fan bases. And I can see it happening to UCLA over and over again. Didn't that happen to them with Wisconsin in a Rose Bowl where literally the place was just red? That's not going to happen in the Coliseum. It may happen at UCLA unless they tarp off half of the Rose Bowl, because there are a lot of Midwest. My mom and dad are from Michigan. There are a lot of people from the Midwest that came out to school here, and like my dad, and said, "Honey, I love you, but we're not going back to Grand Rapids. We're staying here." That live here in Southern California, and they are college football fans. You go to a sports bar on 2nd Street in Long Beach, and you see all kinds of gear. It's not just USC and UCLA. So I'm gonna tell you, the Coliseum is gonna be the greatest thing. You're gonna see full Coliseums, whether it's 90-10, 85-15 USC, or let's say that they have 5 losses of the season. You might start seeing 60-40. I mean, I've been to some Notre Dame games when USC was losing a lot in the early 90s, and there were a lot of Irish fans at the Coliseum, and it was packed, but it wasn't a lot of USC fans. So UCLA is going to learn that lesson this year. I hope USC fans are going to protect the home soil so we don't see what's happened to UCLA in the past.
Yeah, UCLA is going to play a lot of road games in Pasadena, and got to just bust the Bruins' chops and say, hey, you need to pay those calimony funds. You have no choice. You have to take the tarps off. You're going to have to eat this. You're going to have 50, 60,000 opposing fans in your stadium on a regular basis this year.
I wonder if the Big Ten schedulers had that in mind, though, because this could have been brutal, as you guys are outlining for UCLA. If there was this, schedule full of Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Penn State headed their way, but they really get a light touch with their home schedule. Indiana, Oregon, Minnesota. I'm not talking about the quality of teams, folks. I'm talking about the fan base impact. Yeah. Indiana, Oregon, Minnesota, Iowa, USC.
Yeah, Iowa's the only really one that might really fill the yard. Yeah.
So they got a break there. And then, of course, they're the oddball that finishes up with Fresno State to conclude the season.
Yeah, but hey, maybe they can roost some of those tarps. So it'll be interesting. Do they have less tarps, Matt, or they have more tarps or less tarps? I don't know if they'll have more fans.
Gotta pay calimony. They gotta pay calimony.
Oh, that will help pay for it. That's for sure. Iowa fans will help pay. They will give their money.
Barry, thank you so much for the super sticker. Thank you for the contribution, Barry. Appreciate you being here.
And for the rest of you guys, thank you all for being here. And one more time, we'll ask for if you could hit that like button. Obviously, if you're here after an hour and 15 minutes, you like the show. So if you could just do us a kindness and hit that like button, it really would help us out a lot.
Matt, what's going on? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
I just like to say that, some people on our last Friday show asked, hey, guys, can you do 2 hours of taking calls on Fridays? So we are definitely considering that, and we want to see if we can perhaps reward memberships. We do a full hour of our regular show, and then we do our second bonus hour for members. Like, we're thinking about that. And so we might give that a trial run for free one of these next few weeks. So we are considering a 2-hour call-in show on Fridays, but in exchange for paid memberships. So, if you think that's something you're willing to pay for, hey, give us feedback. But we'll when we do our regular hour on Friday, we can continue this conversation with everyone in the chat here at the USC channel at the Voice of College Football.
Matt, what's going on at Trojan's Wire this week?
Not a whole lot. I mean, our readers, they just want football season to come. They want August camp to start. I think that, our site's going to be pretty quiet until Big Ten Media Days. I think that's going to be the launching point for a lot of USC football conversations, and we get into football season. But I'm going to be honest. Like, right now, I'm covering Bronny James in the Summer League. That's like the news that's happening. You also had DeMar DeRozan, a USC alum, getting signed by the Sacramento Kings. So, football news is quiet. And I know that our readers don't want me to write every third day how much Dan Lanning is kicking USC's butt in recruiting. Like, there's only so many times you can write that story. So, just to be honest, it's pretty quiet on the ranch. But Big Ten Media Days in a few weeks should really get things rolling at Trojan's Wire.
I'm going to write a little something about, because I was at the Elite 11 a couple of weeks back. And not that it's funny because this is almost hypocritical of me, but I'm going to write up the fact that, so apparently Julian Lewis is no longer a 5-star quarterback at On3, one of the recruiting sites. I'm going to go into a little bit of that, talk about it a little bit. Also, if you guys haven't seen it, Michael Brockers, I don't know who he is, but he was at LSU? And then I think he was signed by the Lions, but he played years. He was with the Rams, and he finished up his career with the Lions. I think that's he had a great interview with Coach Henderson. If you guys get a chance, if you're a Trojan fan out there, go check that out, because I did a couple of articles. I might even do a little bit more. Preston, a guy I follow on Twitter, if you're not following, also check out Preston. Did a cut up of it, and I just watched the whole interview. I just thought it was great. One of the best takeaways I got from it was just the way Brockers was, we're talking about a 12, 13, 14-year vet, just talking about how much respect they had for Coach Henderson. This guy just kind of walks in. He's kind of, he's a new guy on the block, and you're talking about Aaron Donald, the shoo-in for the Hall of Fame, possibly the best 3 technique ever to play. Walking into this room, and he goes into detail, and I go in my article, I talk about how he was able to win over these guys, with respect, that just by his attention to detail. There's a really funny stuff, but I want to ruin the article. The interview. Go check it out, because again, I think it's called the Brockcast. I can't remember, but just look up Brockers podcast, Coach Henderson. You guys will thank me, because it's just an amazing interview. It goes into full detail about what Coach Henderson is bringing to our team. But it was just funny about how Brockers talked about how much he enjoyed the fact that when they're cutting, he's actually, what do you tell a guy like Aaron Donald? He's like, well, there's always, the film doesn't lie. And he talked about how he would say, yeah, you made a great tackle, you made that play, but your gap, assignment was over there. And you weren't in your gap. You made the play, and he's like, Aaron Donald's like, yeah, I guess you're right, Coach. It's just that little stuff that earned the respect of his team. His attention to detail, and he's not going to sit there and kiss the ass of. He walks brand new into a room. He did not kiss the ass of Aaron Donald. He was the coach, and so this is what we're getting as a coach, and just a brilliant, great interview. And again, just the respect level from both men to each other during that interview was amazing to watch.
Matt, thank you so much for the contribution. Our happy No Pac-12 Network take off air for good.
Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate that, Matt. Thank you all for being here and making this show what it is each and every Monday. And of course, you catch Matt and Tim taking your calls this Friday That's at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific time, 7 where it counts. So mark it down. Be here each and every Friday, back here on Monday. And we will continue our opponents series. And also, we've got a special guest looming this summer as well. All right. For Matt, for Tim, I'm Mark. See you back here on Friday.